This video is about managing people in small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. It's part of an EU-funded Erasmus Plus project called SHARPEN, HRM for SMEs. SMEs HRM, Attraction, Retention and Performance Enhancement Network. 5 partner countries have been involved in this project. It's founded around a key survey on HRM in SMEs that's available on the website. When we asked in the UK what were the key challenges in managing HRM in regional SMEs, these were the key responses. Issues about infrastructure, with transport links being poor, how growth is financed, perhaps an owner not wanting to fund a qualified HR practitioner, or if there is an HR person responsible for people management issues, they can't devote themselves full-time to the role. HRM challenges also included getting the right workforce, an aging workforce, skills problems with a lack of technical knowledge, management and leadership challenges, and as we might expect, issues about recruitment, attracting the right people, finding those with the right attitude, with the right specialist skills in a tight labour market, issues of skill shortages and managerial skills. There were also issues of retention, keeping youngsters and good staff, and also developing attitudes, a kind of global mindset, and getting people to be proactive and flexible. There were also challenges about sickness absence amongst particularly younger employees and how to get employee engagement. Another question we asked in the survey was about HRM performance indicators. How do you measure the effectiveness of HR policies and practices in regional and other SMEs? Some people look at HR costs compared with the overall costs, or the number of full-time employees as a ratio of how many in the HR department, the costs of the HR department versus per employee, the cost of hiring, the number of days it takes to hire someone, costs of learning and development activities overall or by employee, internally, externally, and by hours, the number of activities in learning and development employees engaged in, sickness absence rates overall and by employee. So just to recap some definitions, what is an SME? The EU has this definition currently in 2018 based on headcount or turnover or balance sheet total. So for example, a micro business typically would have less than 10 people, a small sized firm would be less than 50, and an SME is less than 250. So why do SMEs matter? Well, 99% of employees working in SME in Europe, 2/3 of private sector jobs are created by SMEs, and SMEs can be serious anchors for regional economic growth and job creation, supporting national industrial policies. And clearly, many small firms started off as SMEs, like this Apple garage that Steve Jobs started Apple with. And then I guess, what is HRM? Human resource management essentially is about gaining competitive advantage and doing this strategically using a range of tools to develop the commitment of the workforce and their capabilities, and aligning these to the overall corporate strategy and also the functional strategies like marketing, operations, finance, and doing this sustainably over the long term. It's also about creating interesting, decent and meaningful work. And the big question is, how do you get the best out of people to improve organizational performance? And these days, employees are not always those people who work full-time that you see every day based in the organization. There may be people working remotely, there may be people not being paid like volunteers, there may be student interns, self-employed freelance people, apprentices, contractors, seasonal workers, and individuals on 0 contract hours, or even people who were employees who may come back, like alumni. So professionally, in terms of HRM, there are 2 main bodies around the world. The oldest is in Wimbledon in the UK, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, CIPD, and it very firmly is committed to championing better work and working lives. In the US, the Society of Human Resource Management is another membership body for HR professionals. So one of the key questions is, how is HRM in an SME different from HRM in an MNE, a multinational enterprise? So there are arguments that HRM does not fit all sizes, and indeed not all SMEs are the same. Some are startups, some are owner-manager operations, others are charities, some are family firms. They are not simply little big firms. They're not necessarily smaller versions of MNEs. Many don't have a dedicated HR professional, and when they do, they might not be on the board. They may just be focused on defensive HRM, just doing the basics to comply legally. And they may, or they may not, have limited resources in terms of the time and attention they can pay to people and the amount of funding available. Typically, SMEs have flat, informal structures. There are often strong, close relationships between the entrepreneur owner and the employees, and between employees themselves. And where there are policies, often they may not be implemented or monitored. On the other hand, there are plenty of advantages of HRM in SMEs. You can decide at 9 o'clock on the morning what your policy is, and by 9:30 you can implement it. So agility is one advantage. Informality might be another advantage. You can see people face to face, consult, decide things quite quickly. Trust, when people are working closely together, may be a good, strong team spirit. And communications can be very fast. And people can have quite rounded jobs because they are involved in lots of different things. And if the HR practitioner is on the board, then they can be in a very powerful position. Nevertheless, there are limitations and disadvantages. There may be limited funding for salaries, for training, for promotion prospects. There may be no HR specialist, or a lone HR specialist who finds it hard to keep up to date. Opportunities for career progression may be limited, and so graduates may find SMEs unattractive places to work. The personal, close culture may mean there is bullying, individualized ad hoc decision making, informalities, reactive ways of responding to people management issues, a lack of systems, a lack of trade unions, and this may lead to favoritism, discrimination, poor talent management, and poor implementation of HR policies. Anyhow, these are the key activities that we would expect to see in managing people in SMEs and other organizations in terms of HR management, human resource management, and HR development, human resource development. So recruitment, selection, induction, training, performance development, reward, discipline, career planning, promotion, and exit, terminating people's employment, voluntary or involuntary. So the next session quite quickly looks at strategic workforce planning. Ideally, you do plan for the future. This is about identifying the gaps between the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow. What useful, relevant, and accurate people analytics data do you need to help build the workforce for tomorrow and to fit tomorrow's strategy? SMEs can have a severe risk of losing key employees and their capital, which can actually threaten the SME's survival. Issues of CEO succession planning are often problematic. What skill sets do you need tomorrow? And clearly, strategic workforce planning needs to be predictive, not just descriptive. So you need to be responsible and responsive about what the changes are in the labour market and internally. Clearly, in the West and developed economies, often there are issues of ageing workforce, changes in technology which will change people's jobs, and often you need to plan because you need to know the budgets, you need to know scheduling, and changes in new products and services demand new skills and workforces. So this is a 5-step model. Step 1, what is your corporate strategy, your overall direction for your HR strategy? You need to look at supply and demand and the differences, the gaps between what workforce you would like and what you have. You need to make decisions that are well informed with data, people analytics, develop an implementation action plan. Then when you have it, monitor, evaluate and revise it and keep going with your workforce planning. So one example in our study from Kirkwood Hospice in Yorkshire, in Huddersfield, was an example of a new HR manager joining and deciding to develop the skills mix and greater diversity within the organisation. So the hospice is moving towards more of a community strategy, not just focused on the hospice and treating inpatients, but also getting a reputation for looking after those with life-limiting diseases who are still in work and who are not coming to the hospice for end-of-life care. They wanted to change the employer brand to make it attractive for nurses who may be enticed to the major city nearby. How do you generate the goodwill, the family-friendly policies? How do you deal with an aging workforce where nurses may have problems lifting and doing physical work? How this picture here shows all white women. How do you develop a more diverse workforce if you want to have more ethnically mixed patients? There are also issues about what graduates, nursing graduates, universities are producing. Clearly issues of Brexit in the UK, and the HR manager has been tackling this with offering careers advice more generally to the local population, looking at different types of staffing, not just registered nurses, but clearly with always in mind the issues of care and quality, the reputation of the hospice, and being sensitive to the fact that there are many volunteers also working in this organisation and very strict governance issues. The second section we're going to look at is people resourcing. So people resourcing is about integrating processes on the ground operationally that involve recruiting individuals into the organisation, managing them when they're in the organisation, their performance, their potential and their talent, and then dealing with letting people go for promotion to other organisations, whatever other plans they have. So this is a summary of the kinds of activities that SMEs need to get involved with in terms of building effective people resourcing. They need to be mindful of the context, what is happening in the world of work, computerized HR systems, which they may have in-house or outsource, what is happening in the HR profession, who are the key organizational stakeholders like suppliers and customers, and also the overall strategy within which the people resourcing activities are happening. Some organizations have very transactional personnel management, others, for instance, maybe high-tech, rich SMEs, may be more strategic. It's very important for the employee resourcing strategy that it's integrated vertically with the overall corporate strategy, but also horizontally with other parts of the business, such as marketing, IT, finance strategies. Additionally, all these elements of people resourcing need to be linked to other kinds of resourcing, like the reward policy, the employee relations policy, the learning and development policies. In SMEs, we also need to be mindful of age of the organisation and various crises that happen at different times. And at any point, maybe the organisation's survival is under threat. So as the organisation starts, survives, grows, expands and matures, there are various HRM issues to decide about the size of the organisation and how the business is going to grow and change its skills. Here's another example in the UK of Deluxe Beds Limited, a leading bed and mattress manufacturer its overall strategy is growth, but it has to do with low-skilled workers. So a new managing director in this family-owned business started, and she developed new leadership roles, for example, management roles looking after quality, HR and business development. She worked closely with a local university, Huddersfield University, in a knowledge transfer partnership. And also 70% of the workers are Muslim with English not as their first language. So she provided numeracy and literacy skills training, introduced HRM metrics, greater transparency and better systems, and clearly measured this with improved sickness absence rates. The final part of this presentation is about how do we link human resource management, corporate social responsibility, and public relations in regional SMEs. So the EU defines corporate social responsibility as activities in companies where they take responsibility for their impact on society. The European Commission states that CSR is important for the sustainability, competitiveness and innovation of EU enterprises and EU economy, bringing benefits for risk management, cost savings, access to capital, improving customer relationships and HRM. Michelle Greenwood argues that HRM is an inherently ethical activity because it's concerned with the treatment of humans. So issues of employee rights, human dignity, respect, social justice are very important. And there is one argument that doing well happens in business by doing good. So if you can build positive relations, a positive image, reputation for being a good employer and for being socially responsible, this creates positive synergies. So the term socially responsible HRM is another important issue for SMEs to think about. SRHRM, socially responsible HRM, can be seen as key to improving employee commitment, and we assume that that improves employees' performance, which will in turn generate competitive advantage for the organisation. And here we have 8 socially responsible HR practices. So number 1, how you attract and retain employees. 2, how you train and continually develop them. 3, how you manage employment relations. 4, dealing with issues of communication, transparency and social dialogue. Number 5, what do you do about diversity and equal opportunities? 6, do you provide fair remuneration and social benefits? 7, do you care about preventing sickness? Do you deal with health and safety at work? And 8, do you deal with issues like work-life balance, work-family balance? This is a useful checklist for SMEs. Another model is Spence's or Carroll's pyramid, adapted from an employee perspective. So at the very lowest level of the pyramid, you want to create goodwill and be socially responsible as an organisation from an HR perspective, because you want it to survive. And people are relying for their livelihoods on the organisation. The next level up in the pyramid looks at the ethic of care. Do people care for each other? Do they take personal responsibility? Are they emotionally empathetic and supportive? The third aspect is to look at personal integrity. Often small businesses don't have huge structures and huge HR departments, clearly like multinationals. It's much more individualized and personalized. So how do people behave? Do they behave as role models? And then finally, philanthropic refers to things like fundraising and doing things for the community, which can be very important for the success and the image of an SME. So not only does HRM impact on how the overall corporate social responsibility inside the organisation looks and the employer brand outside, but by doing corporate socially responsible activities, a small business can also improve its HRM image, because if there are positive informal behaviours, there's high levels of personal integrity and a supportive culture, this can enhance internal CSR, can enhance attitudes, reduce absenteeism rates, and the likelihood of people quitting the organisation. The CSR HR link suggests that employees who engage in volunteering and fundraising in these kind of activities gain greater satisfaction. They feel they belong to the organisation and their productivity improves. So with greater organisational commitment and identification with the organisation, this may be evidenced in awards and accredited standards, and this can enhance an SME's reputation internationally for being a good citizen and improve their international recruitment if they are recruiting internationally, and more generally the war for talent. There are also issues about political corporate social responsibility. There may be regulatory gaps that disadvantage SMEs, for instance, banks treating SMEs badly, and it's important that SMEs are politically aware, particularly as they may be tied to their local community. So they need to develop networks with other organisations to lobby for change that support, for example, their local Chamber of Commerce. And also internally, CSR employees may be involved in deciding on the methods and materials in the way they do their work, and these may involve socially responsible activities and decision making. On the rather negative side, in terms of the challenges, some people might just be too busy, have other things to do in their lives, and not have time, they feel, to get involved in CSR activities. So some people are involved in them just on a very transactional basis, just to create a good image. Others just enjoy doing it because they build up relationships, or they may do it to develop their skills. But in an organisation where there is distrust, distraction, a lack of interest, for example, employees don't want to go to the office Christmas party. They don't want to play football with each other outside of work. This can be quite difficult to manage. It can also be quite difficult to argue to the board or the CEO and others what is the return on investment in CSR and HR practices. And indeed, they may even do harm. So if you have a young family, you don't have the resources, the money or time, activities like going to a Christmas party, fundraising football, going drinking with colleagues in the name of charitable events outside working time, you can actually feel discriminated against because you're not part of this. So there may be some great CSR publicity, but bad HR. So the organisation may be doing good deeds for the local community, but treating employees badly. There's also the issue of greenwashing, looking green, looking environmentally and responsible and so on, but actually not doing that in practice inside. Without the board members' support or managers' support, none of these may work. And just being good may actually distract you from making money. And you need to be careful that what you're doing for the community is what the community wants. Curiously enough, many SMEs are doing very good things. They have very good HR practices and very good CSR practices, but they're just not communicating this. And if you're starting anew, it may be very important to consult, to engage in dialogue and find out what your interests of your employees are. Maybe someone has a sick child and they would like a particular charity to be sponsored. Growing in importance is employer-supported volunteering. So your managers or directors might be involved in boards of other organisations and professional bodies and gain valuable networking and skills development through it. They may gain awards like the Sunday Times Best 100 Employer to Work For. And all of this CSR needs to be embedded throughout the HR activities. So how do you recruit people using values-based recruitment to fit the kind of values you have in your organization? How do you develop them? How do you reward them? How do you appraise them? And so on, to build your employer value proposition that is positive. So here's an example of a family business, Howarth's, that offers legal services and people and safety management services to local SMEs. This won the UK's Family Business of the Year award and also the Big Heart Award for its foundation. So the managing director, Gavin Howarth's, from this family business says, over the last 15 years we've grown Howarth's based on our family values of trust, respect, honesty and integrity, which our clients understand and respect. Everyone at Howarth's would like to say a huge thank you to all our clients, contacts and associates who have supported us on this journey and helped make these awards possible. So in conclusion, generally we assume that businesses want to be good citizens and to operate responsibly within the law. However, SMEs may have very limited resources in terms of funding, time, expertise and attentions to pay attention to small business social responsibility, CSR, HRM. Their priority may be cash flow, customers, operations. But in regional firms, you may be very embedded in your local community. For example, in our case of Kirkwood Hospice, it's very important for philanthropic donations, for patients and for employees that they are seen to be a good employer and socially responsible. A lot of this depends on the context and the size and what's feasible. And clearly you don't want to distract your employees with lots of extracurricular activities that take them away from doing the real business. But there should be synergies. It's also very important at the individual level. It gives people a sense of moral identity and feelings of being competent, working for a successful company that has good HR and CSR practices. But this link between HRM, CSR and PR is a constant balancing act. Here are some references. So thank you for listening to this video on managing people in small and medium-sized enterprises.